This is the Definitely Uncertain podcast, brought to you by Goldrock Capital. Each week, we look at how high net worth families can improve their lives, decisions, and investments in a deeply uncertain world. We always aim to provide practical information, even if we can't offer specific investment advice. Welcome, everybody, to the Definitely Uncertain podcast. My name is Darren Rockman, and I'm a partner at Goldrock Capital, the 20-year-old multifamily office serving high net worth families in Israel and around the world. And today on the podcast, Micah Avni, founder and CEO of Peninsula Finance. Welcome, Micah.
Good morning, Darren. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining the show. So by way of background, so Micah and I have known each other for a very long time. In fact, I had the great pleasure of being part of the founding investor group into Peninsula and also serving on the board of Peninsula for many years until its successful listing on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. So we go back a long time, Micah and I. We
do. And I was very lucky to have you together with me during that time period. And it was an incredible contribution to the building of the company.
Ah, you're very kind. But you must say that to all the boys. So, okay. So Mike, let's start off. Maybe tell us a little bit about Peninsula.
Okay. So Peninsula provides credit to small and medium-sized businesses in Israel. We're a commercial finance company, and we're not a bank. If we go back 15, 16 years when we founded Peninsula, the Israeli credit market was 100% controlled by the commercial banks, and they were 100% controlled by the banking regulator, who I like to call the Don Corleone of the banking mafia. And that was not good for business owners. They didn't get enough credit. The terms were egregious. It wasn't very comfortable to work with the banks. And so we saw a huge opportunity there to build a business in that market and to change that market. Viewed it both as a financial challenge and opportunity, and also as a Zionist endeavor that we could change the way this market works. And over the past 16 years, we built a great business that provides credit to thousands of small and medium-sized businesses in Israel. The market has evolved dramatically. We've been leaders in that. So today, non-bank commercial finance is well known in Israel. There are 13 publicly traded companies, which on some days Peninsula is the largest of them, depending on where the market is going that day. The industry has been regulated for better or for worse, but there's a licensing procedure in place, and the whole thing is governed and organized. So it's much more comfortable for clients to work with us and for lenders to work with us. The large financial institutions have recognized it as a space where they can put money to play. So, Peninsula is rated A by both Moody's and Standard & Poor's, and we raise money on the public markets quite easily today, as do many of our competitors. And all of that puts a lot of money into play for small and medium-sized business owners to compete with the banks. And so it means that they can get money on better terms, whether that be higher LTV, whether that mean they get the money more quickly, or whether it mean they get better pricing on their deals. And that helps the economy grow and ultimately helps the banks get better at what they do because there's competition.
Okay, so that's terrific. So 16 years later, Micah, you've got a great view of the Israeli economy. You've now seen a couple of cycles. You saw the 2008, 2009 cycle. You were there. You've now seen the 2020, 21 cycle. So from your perspective, and you lend to the core of the Israeli economy, not specifically the high-tech part of the economy, but the what I might call the real economy. How's that part of the economy, or in general Israel, done? How are we fared through the COVID crisis?
So I think in general, the Israeli economy and Israel, the country, has done amazing. I mean, I moved here in 1984, and so I've been able to kind of watch some part of the country's growth, and the economy has just gone through the roof. And in relative terms to other countries in the world, it just keeps getting better and better. And if I look at the economy here specifically over the past year, Obviously, it was a challenging and difficult year for everybody, but I think that the country handled it really well. I think the government handled it well with all of our complaints. And obviously, everybody would like things to be done better, but handled it really well relative to the rest of the world. And I think that the Israeli people and business owners were very entrepreneurial, and where in some countries they said, okay, stay at home now, and people just locked themselves in their houses. Here, people were looking for ways to work and ways to make their businesses continue to operate and ways to cut costs and ways to invest in those. And I really think that we're coming out of this much stronger. So for most people on an economic level and most businesses, this has actually been a pretty good year. It's been a pretty good year because most businesses have not really suffered. They've had opportunity. They had ups and downs. They had challenges, but they had opportunities to fine tune what they're doing. They got some beneficial terms on some of their financing and other things, and people kept spending. Something that I completely misread at the beginning of this crisis was that people would freak out in a way that they would say, well, if I'm stuck at home, I'm going to buy a new car. I'm going to change my electronic goods at home. I'm going to fix my house and then buy new clothes online, whatever it was. And people spent. And Israeli businesses said, hey, we can do business like that. And when I talk to people who have furniture businesses or car businesses, they say this was their best year ever. That they were up 10% over last year. And that also means that they kept all their employees on, that they paid their salaries, that they paid their suppliers, and that whole food chain was around. Now, there are areas of the country that they really got hit, like all over the world. So if you just opened a restaurant, you were run over by a bulldozer, right? If you have a leveraged airline, you're in big trouble. But that's a very small percentage of the economy overall. And if you just had a really poorly run, highly leveraged business, you might have got hit too. But I think there's kind of a natural selection in all of that makes the economy even stronger. And that always goes on. And at the end of the day, I think the government and business owners were quite supportive of the employees. And so throughout the term, I think the country held through.
Is there any concern? Is there any concern out there that some of that consumption really was sort of forward consumption, and that 2021, 22, as people sort of return back to more normal living, aren't stuck at home thinking, hey, I really want to redo my kitchen, but some of that drops off?
I think it's going to take another year or two. I feel like we're going to have to pay this back. There are plenty of people I see in plenty of businesses who spent their savings, right? They spent a big piece of their savings, and the government did the same thing, right? Helping
sure, of course.
People out. I think we're on such a positive wave going forward, and there's such a feeling of euphoria and excitement for people to get out of the house and back to work, that we're going to feel another year or two of spending and excitement. And then we're going to hit some kind of a wall because people are going to realize, wow, I have to cut back because I can't really, I spent my life savings, right? I spent too much over the past year and a half, and businesses will feel the same thing. And how that affects us is going to go back mostly to how the government and the banks manage it, to my mind. If we let the air out of this slowly, I think we'll get through it, because at the end of the day, we've been stronger relative to the rest of the world. And so that will pay off for us.
Right.
And we've got all this high tech and other stuff that continues to bring in money. But if we're mismanaged, and that's my big concern with elections now, is that if we just keep having elections and no budget and government's changing, we may accidentally mismanage how we come out of this crisis.
Right. One of the things as we're sort of coming out that I'm hearing around is that employers are having trouble getting employees to come back to work. So people were sent out on government benefits, on unemployment, the terms that the government offered for unemployment benefits, and it was obviously a great thing, were really eased. But now trying to get people to come back off those benefits seems to be a challenge in some sectors of the economy, restaurants, for example. Are you seeing that? Is that impacting businesses?
We're definitely seeing it. I mean, that's a great point. And it's, we felt it in hiring on our own, and we see it in the thousands of businesses that we fund, that basically for minimum wage level or slightly higher than minimum wage level employees, the government incentive was such that it makes sense to be at home, right? And if you spent a year at home, still getting more or less the same income you had before, and having less expenditures, and having your mortgage put off for 6 months or a year, you're actually feeling pretty good and might have just got used to that. And then to come back to work and not get any more money doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I think we have a problem in the economy with that. I think that's one of the places where we mismanaged it as a country, and the government's going to need to do something to get that back in click, because lots of businesses are having trouble hiring at that end. And at the end of the day, the country can't continue to support people who should be working.
Right. And what about from Peninsula's perspective? What adjustments did you have to do or make, I should say, in your business and in the relationship that your business had with borrowers during this last 12-month period?
Right. So we understood that the world had changed very early on and acted very quickly and aggressively, perhaps looking back at it too quickly and too aggressively. But what we did is we called down all of our credit facilities to make sure that we were very, very liquid. We had hundreds of millions of shekels sitting in the bank. We cut down our lending book by almost 40% over a period of 3 months, basically triaged everything and looked at everything that was too highly leveraged to our mind and got out of it. Not great for customer relations, but if I go back to kind of the period of the end of February through June, there was an unlimited amount of uncertainty. Just nobody had any idea where we were going. And it's easy to forget that. And it could have been much, much worse. So the result of that is that we ended in June with an exceptionally stable business, cash flush, and less income than we normally have. But we were able to then start to grow and start to work from a great position. And so for 2020, we started to look at opportunities where there are businesses or things that might have got thrown out of whack. And we did our first acquisition, which was incredibly profitable for us. And I'm not sure that it would have happened in a regular environment. It happened because the other side was stressed out. We were cash flush and hungry and had time on our hands because we had already gone through 3 months of triage. And so we were able to do that deal. And in parallel, we've been growing again organically. I did see during the year, certain relationships, certain employees who maybe aren't cut out to be in high stress situations. And because we really treat the business as a family, so we kept everybody on. We didn't fire anybody during the entire year. We didn't let anybody go. After this was over, we saw a number of places where there were employees and or suppliers who weren't carrying their weight and made adjustments recently in a very humane way. But I think the result of it was a little bit of a shakeup that made us much stronger. And I think that's happened throughout the economy.
Right. So it's what you were saying before about sort of survival of the fittest. The better businesses got stronger and maybe some of the weaker businesses, except for those who just happened to be in the wrong place when the bus came in around the corner. The weaker businesses fell apart.
Right. Which I think we're in a much better place relative to the whole world. Because I think there are lots of countries where culturally everybody just sat back and said, okay, we're not supposed to do anything now, so we won't.
Right. So you're part of the sort of, startup nation can-do culture that you see here in Israel. Yeah. So we started to talk a moment before about 2021, 2022. What's your outlook for the economy in general? What areas, how do the weak parts of the economy, wedding halls, we mentioned restaurants, the tourism industry, how are those going to manage? How are we going to manage without having very open skies? We're starting to reopen, but it's slow and somewhat hesitant. How does it play out?
I think there are two overlaying themes. One is euphoria. I think people are just excited to get back to work and to get out again. And so they're going to be spending and they're going to be working really hard and they're going to be investing in over the next year or two. And all those things will be good for the economy. And that's across the board. I think the government will be trying to figure it out. And hopefully if they can work in an organized fashion, then they'll be supporting the areas that really hit the wall and that they can help them out. My big concern, of course, is government stability. If we can't put together a government now, irregardless of who's going to lead that government and how, if we can't have a stable government, we can't have a budget, that may throw everything off. That's and so we have a greater level of uncertainty than we had 3 years ago, right? Right now, I think we're going to be in a good period over the next couple of years if the government doesn't throw it off. Inside of Israel, I think we're back to normal. I think in terms of businesses operating and everything, we're back to normal now. I think, we probably got another year of limitations on travel, and people learned how to work without travel in a lot of areas with Zoom and whatnot over the past year. But there are certain industries that are going to continue to hurt tourism lines, obviously, and some of high-level trade where you have to be going back and forth and meeting with people to make it happen.
Right. I should note that we are recording this on the 24th of March, the morning after the election. So Micah, and everybody else here is still trying to work out what the hell's going on.
Right. And my greatest hope is for stability. Putting politics aside, I really think that that's something that we need. And unfortunately, there's is not well
Yes.
structured.
We haven't had very much of
Yes.
for the last couple of years. Let me just go sort of open up the spectrum to the sort of global situations. So ultra low interest rates around the world have been propping up and stabilizing economies really, for many years now, and in extreme sense since March of 2020. And it's one of the things it's done is it's led to sky high corporate borrowing, really down, a lot of it concentrating at the top end of corporates, but with time also filtering down to smaller, medium-sized and smaller businesses. Are you seeing something similar here in Israel? And do you see this as being the basis for potentially some problematic credit going down the road?
So first of all, I definitely see it happening in Israel on all levels. The country is getting more levered. I actually think it's quite a good thing. I think at the end of the day, it's a driver for growth, and that relative to the rest of the world as an entrepreneurial nation, we're better set to benefit from that growth. And so if we're investing across the board and people are borrowing all around the world from Israel and buying up properties around the world, investing in companies around the world, and building what they have here with that leverage, I think ultimately it's going to make us much, much stronger as a nation. There'll definitely be some backlash. I mean, the interest rates will not stay low forever, right? And when they start to go up, some amount of those levered businesses will not be able to meet it, and there'll be some real damage there. But I kind of look at it like 50 Shades of Finance. I don't see it so much of equity and debt. It's you may lend at 4% interest, and you have a certain risk that somewhere along the way, one of your loans, you're going to take a big hit on it as a private investor, as a public investor, whatnot. But when you balance out all the way you're operating, money you put out and money you're getting back, ultimately it's going to create a greater benefit. So you're going to get it back somewhere else. So I do think that when interest rates change, we're going to see default rates go up. At the current rates, I think that people are just growing and using it to benefit. So it's a good thing to my mind.
Right. Okay. The Taub Center, which is a public policy think tank here in Israel, has been talking for a while about the two-speed Israeli economy. On one side, you've got the high-tech economy, which has benefited from massive flows of capital from overseas, high wages, the exits. And again, we're talking early 2021, the exits over the last 12 months, whether it's IPO, SPACs, has just been off the charts. And the growth in wealth of people, including people that you and I know, has been really phenomenal. And then you've got the other part of the economy, which is unable to make a transition into the tech economy because educational barriers and skill barriers are just so high. Do you see, when you look at it from your vantage point, do you see this as being a problem economically, sociologically for Israel?
I think it's a problem in the Western world. The disparity of wealth and the growing disparity in the information technology age is pushing that. I think that actually in Israel, because we're such a high-tech powerhouse, that while the disparity is growing, there's lots of people getting really wealthy, which I think is healthier than just having 2 or 3 people who are controlling the whole country. And I think ultimately that will create a greater spread of the wealth internally. But I see that disparity. And the thing that's most concerning to me, I've been thinking about this a lot recently, is that we, on a government level, we really dropped the ball. We're having these huge exits, right? And what's happening? Over the years, we allowed massive foreign investment with no taxation of their investments, with a thought that was correct 30 years ago to bring in foreign investments. But right now, what's happening is the world is making tens of billions of dollars on Israel and taking it out without it being taxed. In a time period, we don't need that. We have enough local money to make these investments. We have enough local desire that we could tax those foreign investors, and they would still come because they're good investments. And if they didn't come, the locals would make those investments. We don't need that money in the same way anymore. So every time we read about a $10 billion exit, the government is leaving $3 or $4 billion on the table. And it makes no sense to my mind. And that money could be used then to help out the people who aren't part of those huge exits. And I don't think it would stop growth in high tech. I think it would work just fine, and we could transition into that. And people are afraid to say that out loud if they realize it.
Well, it's a fascinating point. It's a fascinating point. In fact, it reminds me of the discussion that was happening probably about 15 years ago when the salary of an Israeli software engineer became at the same level as the salary of one in Silicon Valley. And everybody said, oh my God, that's the end for Israeli high tech because we were a source of cheap labor for global companies and US companies. And that didn't happen. In fact, things have only gotten better since then because people are coming here not for the cheap labor, they're coming here because of the skills and because of the abilities. And so you're saying even if we had taxation, they probably would keep coming.
They would still come, or local investors would do the investing. And then we benefit twice. It would be taxed and some of the money would be spread around, and the rest of it would stay in the hands of Israelis and then be used to build the country. So I think we're really missing out in a big way on that. And it was true. I was part of it 25 years ago of this discussion. Right. We have to bring in, and I went to the tax authorities about, we have to bring in foreign investors and let them come in and with preferential tax treatment and whatnot. That was true at the time. But today we're in a different environment. People want to invest in Israel and they don't need a tax incentive to do it.
Interesting. Fascinating. Okay. Micah, I want to take the discussion into another area completely, if you don't mind, and away from business. And let's just talk about your personal story, which is both in some ways a very difficult story and in some ways an amazing story. So maybe tell us a little bit about your dad, and then I'll let you tell the story.
Okay. So my father was brutally murdered in a terrorist attack a little over 5 years ago in Jerusalem. He was an elementary school principal. He was a kind, gentle person. He was I'm a little subjective in this, but I think really one of the nicest people in the world, and somebody who just was concerned all the time about other people, and a peace activist and an educator of children. And he was brutally murdered, and it really shook my world. I mean, it was, we all experience death, and it's a horrible thing, and it's difficult. But when this kind of evil just comes out of nowhere and hits you, it really rocks you at your core. And a day or two after he was murdered, a video went viral all around the world with a reenactment of the murder. The Hamas student union put out a video. And it was encouraging young Muslims to go out and murder Jews, and it was all over the place. It was on YouTube, it was Facebook, it was on every platform you could think of, and in hundreds of thousands of views on every platform. And at the time, going back to the end of 2015, nobody was talking about the role of social media and the spread of terror and how it impacted. And at the time, and things have changed so much that it's hard to even imagine, but going back to the end of 2015, all of the terrorist organizations were operating freely on social media to fight, to recruit, to pull their troops together. Facebook would recommend friends. They would say, these people in the Hamas, and you might want to be friends with them too. And all that was going on, nobody was talking about it, and it blew my mind. And I was energized by this horrible thing that happened, and I said, I want to try to influence how to change that. And I started doing lots of stuff, writing about it, speaking about it, filing lawsuits, promoting legislation. And I kind of kicked off on this one-man psychotic influence campaign. And it took off. Lots of other people, lots of organizations got involved, and very quickly, people started talking about this. And I called up a friend in New York who's a publicist, and I said, how do I publish an op-ed in the New York Times? And he basically said, you don't. They get millions of applications and they hardly publish anything. Right. Give me the contact information of the editor, and I sent in this op-ed talking about how social media was really a platform for the spread of terror. And they published it a couple of days later, and that just kicked off a slew of feedback and discussions. And if you jump ahead today, social media has been fairly changed their tune on terror. I mean, they have all of the companies have executive level management who's in charge of this. Facebook has thousands, if not more than 10,000 employees who deal with taking down posts about terror, trying to stop the spread of terror and whatnot. And I think that had an effect on kind of what was happening in terror around the world. That lots of other things went on, but the fact that kids were no longer sitting and spending 6 hours watching videos telling them to go out and murder Jews or murder Americans or whatever, really had a big impact. I also saw during that, I worked with a lot of pro-Israeli organizations, and I saw how inefficient that ecosystem was. And I decided to try to get involved there. And since then, I've been leading a public-private partnership between the government and pro-Israel organizations around the world to combat the delegitimization of Israel and BDS. And we work kind of quietly in the background. It's called Concert Together for Israel. And we fund and help guide organizations that are working to promote Israel's image and to combat delegitimization of BDS. After running this influence campaign, I kind of took a step back and I decided I wasn't cut out to be in the public eye. I've taken myself off of social media for the most part and stopped being involved in public speaking things and whatnot. But in the background, we're promoting a lot of important stuff. And
Mike, that's absolutely wonderful and inspiring, and incredible story of turning real tragedy into making the world a better place. So on behalf of all of us, that's well done. It's just really incredible. And thank you for that, most importantly, and thank you also for being a guest on the podcast.
And thank you, Darren. Thank you for having me. Thank you for being a friend over the years and a supporter and a partner. And I really feel forever indebted to you. And I think
well, thanks. And that's terrific. And everybody, thanks for watching. This is the Definitely Uncertain podcast. You can get us on YouTube, iTunes, I don't know, everywhere, carrier pigeons, wherever you get your podcast, you'll be able to find us, video and audio. If you have any ideas for future episodes, please drop us a line, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks, Micah, and thanks, everybody.